clap. There we go. Fourth attempt. Hello and welcome to another scintillating, captivating and exhilarating episode of Almost Breaking News. My name is Robert Llewellyn and I am the founder and one of the presenters of the Fully Charged Show and the Everything Electric channel. Now, we've got a lot of stories for you. Hopefully they will be enlightening, entertaining and illuminating and shine a light on various clean tech developments and breakthroughs around the world. Love everything electric? Join us live in Canada this September, the South in October,
and Australia and London in 2025.
And let's start with a fascinating statistic recently reported in the Australian publication Renew Economy. Basically, the report suggests that in 2025, the global energy storage capacity of big grid batteries around the world will overtake pumped storage, a system of storing energy that has been widely adopted and been in use for the past 60 plus years. But what the figures show is the truly mind-boggling speed of growth of grid-level battery storage. According to figures from one of our podcast guests, Professor Mark Jacobson, as recently as 2020, there was a mere 17 gigawatt hours of battery storage available on the grid. To put pumped storage into context, there was at the same time 159 gigawatt hours of pumped storage capacity available around the world, meaning 90% of global electricity storage in 2020 was from pumping water from a low reservoir or lake to a high one and then letting it flow back down when demand required it, spinning the old turbines. Now, we've covered the huge pumped storage facility at De Norwig, and if you haven't seen it, it's worth checking out. I'll put a link in the show notes. But jump to this year, and batteries around the world now have a combined capacity to store 156 gigawatt hours. So over the last 4 years, 139 gigawatt hours has been mined, refined, manufactured, shipped and installed around the globe. It is mind-boggling. While pumped storage installations are still being developed, all the predictions are that next year battery storage capacity will overtake pumped hydro. And importantly, this is not to denigrate pumped hydro in any way. It has been and it always will be a critically important part of future energy systems. But what it does show is batteries are rapidly becoming the go-to solution for running grid networks on more and more renewables, and importantly, in any location. To build a pumped storage system, you really do need quite a lot of mountains and water and lakes and a lot of connecting infrastructure. These massive batteries that we're talking about here can be plonked down anywhere, and they are operating as grid regulators, charging from wind and solar when those sources are abundant and of course cheap, then discharging them for a few hours during peak demand, which of course reduces the need to burn really expensive gas in peaker plants. And I promise not to drone on about batteries too much, but now this. A Chinese company have just launched a battery boat. So who cares, I hear you cry. We've seen loads of battery electric boats on the Fully Charged show. However, this one is a little bit bigger. This is a 10,000-ton container ship which carries cargo along the Yangtze River in China between Shanghai and Nanjing, a distance of 196 miles by river or 315 kilometres, on one charge. Now, it can travel further if needs be, and they can put batteries in containers on the deck, but on this normal route, it only uses about 80% of its capacity, and of course avoids burning many tens of millions of tons of bunker fuel over the ship's lifetime. Now, we did travel in a large electric car ferry from Denmark to Sweden in an episode of the Fully Charged show a few years back, but that only did a trip of 4 kilometres each way. Okay, it does that trip 46 times a day, constantly crossing back and forth between Sweden and Denmark, carrying tons of trucks and cars and passengers. The ferry charges at each side of its journey at around 1.5 megawatts coming from wind turbines. It's completely carbon zero, this ferry. It's brilliant. It charges just while it's loading and unloading, doesn't slow it down at all. And the battery has a 4 megawatt hour capacity, and that's perfect for that use case. Well, just remember that, 4 megawatt hours in a big ferry. This container ship has a 50 megawatt hour battery. So truly enormous capacity. And this shows just how fast this technology is progressing and how confident big engineers and proper companies that have to make money are in that technology. And for those of you who want to explain to me that this ship could not cross an ocean, I know that. Of course it can't. It can travel close to 200 miles along a big river. But in another 10 years, I wouldn't like to guess. Who knows? Anyway, whatever opinion we have about the technology being developed today in the world of batteries, it will be out of date by the time you or I pontificate about it. Next story. Now, I know we've possibly been a little bit critical about big SUVs on the Fully Charged show for some time, but in all fairness, we might have a point. A recent report from Bloomberg has backed up our concerns with some hard data, indicating that the fashion for these vehicles just might need to be questioned a bit, very politely. I recently reported on the incredible rise of electric scooters and mopeds in a recent Almost Breaking News episode, and how that has measurably dented demand for petrol around the world. But, scooters and mopeds are used by very intelligent people in Asia. Obese SUVs are popular with people here in developed Western countries. And yes, I'm being a bit goading. I'm a little bit goady because there's people still buying these ridiculous machines. And obviously I'm talking about petrol and diesel SUVs. Bloomberg state that SUVs accounted for a record 48% of global car sales in 2023, up from 41% in 2020. So it's rising. And here's another chilling quote from the report. Over the course of 2022 and 23, global oil consumption directly related to SUVs rose by a total of over 600,000 barrels a day, accounting for more than a quarter of the overall annual growth in oil demand. Well, yeah. I know there are some very popular, I know there's popular electric SUVs that use more electricity than a smaller, lighter EV, but they're not burning buckets of refined oil every time they're driven down the shops to buy some tea bags. I can't wait for SUVs to become unfashionable. And yes, judging by those ever-increasing sales figures, I've got a long, long wait. Next story. Okay, if someone is driving a big, thirsty fashion tank and it breaks down, and they do break down quite often, we see them all over the roads every time we drive anywhere, but at least now in the UK, the roadside recovery can be a little bit more responsible. The UK Automobile Association, better known as the AA, has just introduced its first 100% electric recovery vehicle. How cool is that? And this is big enough to load up a broken down 3-ton diesel SUV. It has a range of 170 miles and is intended for use in low and zero emission zones in an increasing number of UK cities. Because if you want to drive your big diesel or petrol SUV in these cities, you have to pay from now on. And some rich people are so fashion conscious, they're prepared to pay enormous amounts of money every day to continue to drive these ridiculous tanks in cities. Anyway, next story. Counter to that bit of depressing news, here's some really encouraging news about electric cars. For how long have we all heard the phrase, electric cars are just too expensive for the ordinary, hard-working family? Well, speaking personally, I've been hearing this since 2009, and it's the one really solid argument against electric cars. I totally agree with it. A brand new petrol or diesel car has always been cheaper than a brand new electric car. Until now. I knew this time would come, I just didn't know when. Very recently, the new 100% electric Dacia Spring was launched and it costs, wait for it, £14,345 on the road. If you lease it instead of buy it outright, monthly lease costs are estimated to be sub £100 a month. It's a small, light, super cheap to run. It needs minimal maintenance with 140 miles real world range. And if you live in a city, just possibly it's a little bit of a more sensible choice than a 3-ton diesel SUV. I'm just saying. This is a critically important car because it's a sign not only that other European car makers, but very specifically the Chinese brands who are selling in Europe, are going to see there's some real competition at the cheaper end of the car market. And that might encourage more manufacturers to aim in that direction and not always go for high-end, super luxury, incredibly technically complicated, expensive cars. This is going to be a good thing for the majority of us, the normal, hard-working families who want to drive an electric car. But there's more stories emerging in this space. With President Biden's quadrupling of tariffs on imported Chinese cars, there's a lot of collaboration going on in the United States. Volkswagen are working with XPeng, Stellantis with Leapmotor, and now Renault are working with a Chinese engineering company, not sure who it is, on the new electric Twingo. This is a brilliant, small, cheap electric car. I'm so pleased that Renault are going to start making the Twingo again. I've said this before and I'll say it again. In the next 18 months to 2 years, a new, shiny electric car will be cheaper to buy than any new petrol or diesel burner. The industry knows this. The oil industry in particular knows this. The companies installing charging infrastructure know this. The talk of a slowdown in electric vehicle sales is a fossil-funded pipe dream. I suspect that we will start to see complex partnership deals with US automotive companies because the simple fact is the Chinese are leaps and bounds ahead of most Western automakers with their electric vehicle technology. Next story, and now for something very different. Hot bricks. Now, I'm sure we're all aware that many industrial processes need very large amounts of heat, really high temperatures, which allow us to develop materials we use in everyday life. Up to now, heat has always been supplied by burning something up, wood, coal and gas. But just recently, a Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, spin-off company called Electrified Thermal Solutions has developed a kind of brick that can hold incredible levels of heat and store it for later use. What does that mean? That means you could use electricity when it's really, really cheap to heat up these bricks, but then actually use the heat much later the following day to make things that you need. Using electricity to heat up, these ceramic bricks become white hot, reaching temperatures of up to 1,800 degrees Celsius, which is well beyond the melting point of steel. And when packed together in an insulated container, they have enough thermal mass to hold the heat for days. So, okay, I understand that, but then how do you use electricity to heat these bricks? Well, it appears they have come up with a unique mixture of metal oxides that are mixed in with the brick material and are embedded inside the bricks. And those metal oxides conduct electricity. So instead of a heating element buried in through the brick, electricity flows through the entire material of the brick, heating the whole thing. Bottom line, there are thousands of people all over the world finding ways to allow us to stop burning fossil gas and coal, as well as oil. Now, some of these developments are going to radically shift the world we live in, and some will fail and be totally forgotten. But I just want to illustrate some of these developments. Things are changing all over the place, and we have to remember that some of these changes are actually going to be for the better. Of course, some companies are determined to cling on to old, inefficient technology. Next story. Now, signs are not looking that good for the likes of Toyota. We all know it's a massive company with huge factories all over the world. But in another story from Electric, it's reported that the workforce employed by BYD, a car company that basically didn't exist 15 years ago, is now larger than Toyota's. Yes, BYD now employ 500,000 people around the world. And what do BYD make? Well, their last ever petrol car rolled off the production line in early 2022. So apart from the odd hybrid, they only produce electric vehicles of all sizes, and these vehicles are selling in their millions. Toyota was so far ahead of anyone else 20 years ago. The Prius was a revolutionary, game-changing vehicle. A huge number of people, including myself, drove a Prius before we drove an electric vehicle. Toyota facilitated the transition to battery electric transport and did not take advantage of it. They are sticking with petrol hybrids still to this day, and a very limited range of 100% electric cars. It's very sad. Next story. On a more optimistic note, we've covered a lot of stories about heat pumps over the last few years. We know how popular they are in Scandinavia and many European countries, and how ridiculous the scare stories are in the UK press. But this is a story about a heat pump that is a little bit different. It's the world's biggest heat pump, and it's recently been turned on in the city of Esbjerg in Denmark. They extract thermal energy from seawater, yes, seawater, in Denmark, not exactly a tropical paradise, and then using supercritical carbon dioxide, which is CO2 pressurized and heated above its critical point, making it the first of its kind to provide thermal energy, that is, the transfer of heat on a major industrial scale. Electricity to run the compressors and other equipment is provided by a local wind farm. The project was built by the German engineering firm MAN Energy Solutions. The installation produces 280,000 megawatt hours of heat a year and keeps 25,000 Danish houses and buildings toasty warm. It has 2 supersized heat pumps, and these bad boys are big enough to replace the town's existing coal power plant and its waste-to-energy incinerator. Isn't that brilliant? This Danish town has stopped burning stuff. Next story. And although I'm trying not to mention the fossil fuel industry too much, they do rather hog the limelight. However, an American state, Vermont, with a Republican governor, a man called Phil Scott, has decided to enact a law requiring fossil fuel companies, wait for it, to pay a share of the damage caused by climate change after the state suffered catastrophic summer flooding and damage from other extreme weather events. Oh my goodness. Under the legislation, the state treasurer and others will provide a report on the total cost to Vermonters and the state from the emission of greenhouse gases from January the 1st, 1995, so that is 30 years ago, to December the 31st, 2024. I have no idea how this will play out in the courts. I do know, and I'm very confident, that the fossil fuel industry will throw unimaginable amounts of money and lawyers, incredibly adept lawyers, who will fight this with extreme prejudice. But the very fact that it's happening at all deserves some attention. I wonder how many other states and countries are considering such legislation. Next story. As regular viewers will know, we cover many of the latest electric cars on our regular Fully Charged shows. So I want to mention a few electric machines that are not cars. First, diggers. Now, there's a big building site in Gothenburg, Sweden. We've all walked past such construction zones in cities, big noisy diggers, loads of compressors going, drills, all that stuff, noisy, big trucks moving tons of rocks around, big trucks delivering loads of cement. However, this construction site is a lot quieter and less smelly because all the heavy plant on this building site that's doing all the work is electric. It was an experiment run by Volvo and numerous building and power companies. Now, the tests were carried out on real construction sites with electrically powered wheeled and crawler excavators. That's what they call them. But it's tracked, the ones that go along like that, tracked excavators. Big wheel loaders and load carriers weighing between 3.5 and 30 tons. So not just little lightweight things, big chunky fellas. The majority of the machines are battery powered, others were cable connected. The study concluded that all the tests were successful, and importantly, there was no compromise made using these machines. They operated for as long as any similar sized diesel powered machines. There is now no reason on a large construction site to rely on filthy diesel machines alone. With a little bit of pre-planning before construction begins, the power supply can be installed, allowing all the electric-powered machines to do the job just as well, if not better, than the old diesel stuff. A building site environment is hugely improved for the people working there. They're not breathing in toxic fumes all day. It's much quieter. The people who operate the machines stated that they much preferred them. It's kind of obvious. And thankfully, companies like Volvo are now producing a huge range of electric heavy equipment. Last story. An electric vehicle with rear-wheel drive, 402 brake horsepower and 443 pounds-foot of torque. Chunky. But of course, this isn't a car. This is the very latest iconic red London double-decker bus, made by BYD, of course. These will be appearing on London streets very soon, joining an already impressive 1,000 fully electric double-decker buses run by Transport for London. They've also got electric bus, single-decker buses. In fact, London now has one of the biggest electric bus fleets in Europe. Who knew? Probably the people who run them. The difference all these electric buses have already made to air quality in London is impressive. They've done some research recently at primary schools in central London, and the air quality is better than it was 5 years ago. And this is set to get much better when the entire fleet of 8,600 buses are either hydrogen fuel cell or battery electric. And to be fair, there's not that many hydrogen fuel cell ones. Most of them are battery electric. BYD says this new all-electric bus has been specifically designed for London and will enter service later this year as it gradually replaces the old Routemaster diesel stinkers. I mean, they are bad. When I used to cycle in London, I used to stop sometimes when a bus overtook me to let it go further on because the smell of the diesel was choking. Now, this new electric bus has a giant 532 kilowatt-hour battery, giving it a real-world range of over 400 miles. And I just want to underline the fact that these buses can do anything a diesel bus can do in a working day with zero problem. A much smoother ride, no tailpipe emissions, and a massive eye-watering saving in terms of fuel costs. Now, we do hope to shoot an episode later this year about how London's buses have been transformed by the switch to electric and how you charge thousands of buses every day without causing mass blackouts, melting the grid, which starts riots and obviously a civil war. That's what I've been told will happen. Hasn't happened yet. Anyway, that's it for this episode of Almost Breaking News. I hope you enjoyed it. Please tell your pals about the Fully Charged Show and the Everything Electric Show. Please do come along to one of our live events if they're anywhere near you. Obviously, subscribe to this channel. And as always, if you have been, thank you for watching.